Everyone, welcome to Tech Southwest, the July Tech Gathering, the first of the 3 sessions this morning. If there's tech issues, that kind of stuff, just drop a note in the chat if you can't hear one of us or something like that. But we'll do our best, and hopefully that's all kind of working. So let's crack on. So this first session in the 9 Tales of Tech, which is great. We've got 3 sessions, 3 different people, organisations in each one, which does add up to 9. So that's good. So well done us for getting our maths right. Joined by Brian Prescott, Centre Director of Bath SETsquared Innovation Centre. Morning, Brian. Briony Phillips, Scale Up Lead at Rocketmakers. Morning, Briony.
Morning.
This is also the sound check, you see.
Morning.
And Steve Edwards, Centre Director of Bristol SETsquared. Morning, Steve. Okay, can't hear Steve. Can we hear you?
Morning.
There we go. Yeah, we can. Yeah, cool. So this first session really is kind of looking at the startup scene in terms of, of course, the current situation that we find ourselves in. And I'm going to start with a really simple question. We'll start with you, Steve. What is happening right now with that startup scene in terms of your perspective, what you're seeing, what people are telling you as we go through this process of lockdown and coming out of lockdown and uncertainty? Steve.
Sorry, I was distracted. You can tell I'm actually in a building.
You're in a building with other people. That must be quite novel.
Good question.
So that's something positive. So what from your perspective, Steve, what can you see happening with the startup scene? Is it dead on its feet? Is it huge turmoil? Are there signs of life? What are the big sort of challenges right now? Definitely
not dead on its feet. I think the reality is we're in a massive economic turmoil. I think government support so far has probably hidden the impact, and is only the reality is the economic impact is going to get worse, unfortunately. And therefore the opportunities for jobs, conventional jobs, is going to be hard. We know in times of downturn and recession that startups become a key way for people to make money and build a career. So we saw it in 2008. It's going to be the same now. So there's a huge demand for people to set up new businesses, to create new ideas, because there is a need. And I think from a SETsquared point of view, from an incubator point of view, I think not only is an opportunity for us to help them, I feel like there is almost a duty that we need to be there to help as many people as possible, looking to actually get out there and say, if you want something to do. I found a number of people that we talk to. They may not necessarily be right for SETsquared at the moment, but I certainly will try and give them advice and guidance as to where they can go to get the next bit of help to get them on the journey, because we want anybody who's got an idea and a bit of ambition and a bit of hope to do something, we want them to make the right connections so they can go on. Yeah, and actually at times like this, those kind of people with the potential to create jobs and value are more important than ever, aren't they? When there's all this change. So, Briony, from your perspective, into the scale-up lead at Rocketmakers, what are you seeing right now?
I guess I've got 2 perspectives on this. So one is certainly from the kind of Rocketmakers view, and we're seeing some really interesting an uptick in interest and potential new clients in terms of the sales pipeline. So interesting companies coming through to talk to us about their ideas, which is really exciting, particularly around health tech and well-being. We've had a real flurry in that area, and also some kind of broader, more environmental ideas as well as some ed tech stuff coming through as well. So a real range of different sectors, but often in some way related to this magical situation in which we find ourselves with the virus and this new way of living and working. So some really interesting stuff coming through, and certainly more so than we had this time last year. So which is really positive. Coronavirus isn't the only thing that's changed at Rocketmakers since then, but certainly is an interesting reflection. And we've also seen some more kind of scale-up companies coming through. So we love to work not just with the early stage startups, but with the companies who are looking to disrupt markets as well and are perhaps a bit further down their journey. And we've seen some really interesting innovation opportunities where people are looking to pivot their current offer, which is reflected, I think, in a statistic I mentioned and love mentioning at the moment, but that 85,000 new online businesses have launched during lockdown in the UK, which I think is phenomenal. And of that number, nearly 4,200 were in the southwest. Okay. And that's the largest number in any region by population. So I think that's a really good indication of the willingness to innovate in the region, which is great.
It's nice concrete evidence, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, and to have that considered from somewhere else. So that was a UK tech news link, which I'll add into the chat in a moment. Yeah, and then the other area that I've just been reflecting on a bit overnight is investment. So you'll know that I also work with TechSpark as part of their investment activator program, and so we're looking at how we can really invigorate the investment activity and support more companies to raise funds, which, as you would imagine, is slightly challenging at the moment, with a lot of investors doubling down on existing investments rather than looking for new portfolio additions. But yeah, I did a quick review of Bohurst's data because they give some insights there, and there's 82 companies across the southwest who have raised funds, raised investment, equity investment, since the start of April.
Right.
And between them, they've raised £89 million. And 23 companies have actually raised £1 million or more. So some really positive statistics there, which do suggest that there's some good money and support flowing into the region and reform.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really encouraging. Okay, and now I turn to you, Brian, from your perspective in terms of what's happening with that startup scene right now and how are you seeing it?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what I've heard so far. It's a really interesting tale out there. We sort of took a slightly different tack on this when we were right at the height of the pandemic. We set out to do our own impact survey, looking at our population of businesses that we work with through the Innovation Centre, both our members, our residential members, and businesses that work with our hub programmes. And we found that actually around about 50% of those don't see a huge problem in getting through the crisis, which is quite surprising. I was quite taken aback by the amount of resilience there is out there. I suspect that is a lot to do with the fact that businesses that are involved with incubators do have a tendency to think a little longer term and do tend to shepherd their runways pretty well in terms of the investment they have available. So I think for us, it kind of tells us that we've got a really strong base of business there. We also looked at some of the sort of dropouts that were happening there. What sort of businesses were they? Were they really early stage? Were they slightly later stage? And I think those businesses that have sort of quite quickly adapted, who've been out, rewriting their business plans pretty much from day one, and are focusing very much on the markets that are starting to come back first. I think they're the ones that will stand the greatest chance of succeeding through this. But I would also echo that, historically, what tends to happen with these things is if you have a big disaster in the marketplace, you get a bounce back. And there will be, I think, as a result of all this, a lot more activity in startups. So from our point of view, whilst COVID-19 was obviously a pretty terrible thing to have happened, it also has the upside, if there is one, of creating opportunities for incubators and accelerators to support the businesses that are out there in the market and the ones that are coming through. Yeah,
no, that's really interesting, and sort of leads on nicely to that whole. We're all experiencing different ways of working right now, and of course, across the region, we have physical hubs, incubators, science parks, and the like, and we have programs that are delivered through those, as well as more kind of virtually, and we have a blended approach. That's all kind of being struck by the tsunami, and that is shake-up, isn't it? And that is change. So I suppose one of the things is what does it mean for those physical hubs and these programs and going forward? I mean, Steve, I suppose you guys are already thinking, planning, what is that kind of blended approach?
Yeah, I think that COVID has given us this sort of complete jolt as to how we work. And, the observation is the way that we work in offices was never designed. It was just, by happenstance, we just ended up being in offices, and that's when everyone. And if you actually took a design-led approach to how you actually want to operate and how you want to work with people, there are opportunities to do that now. We have a lot of businesses who we kicked everybody out of the building, everyone started working from home, and then they discovered, do you know what, in some instances they get much greater productivity. Some of our members have said, it's marvellous, we work 9 till 6, we get a load of stuff done, we don't have any of the chit chat. Now, the problem is after 2 months of that, then everyone starts getting burnt out, they start missing out on social. So we are working out how to have that blended approach, and we've got a lot of demand from people who want to be in the building a couple of days a week, but and because they want to get together. Some of it is they actually have to do work stuff, so it's more about needing more meeting rooms, more collaboration space, more kit to help them get better collaboration together. Some of it is about being social. So the reasons why you actually want to be in the same building together, we're working through to identify exactly what those elements are and then meeting those needs. I think the other thing which is important for the Southwest is you don't have to be in London anymore. We proved that all the people who moved down here a long time ago are now showing that they did the right thing. But I've had a conversation with someone this week who's looking to move 30, 40 people from London down to the Southwest. And he said, basically, we've been thinking about leaving London for 10 years. I put a survey out to my staff and said, if you were going to go anywhere else, where would it be? And he said, I've got 3 Bs, Brighton, Bristol and Barcelona.
I was going to say, was it the Balearics or Barcelona? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But that's, that is a reflection of, Bristol and cool and exciting, and as a culture, people want to come here, and so that is the right thing to do. We can bring them here, and people want to live here, and therefore you can help.
I think that's a wider Southwest piece, isn't it? Actually, in terms of we are this wonderful peninsula that sticks out, like being on the edge, like being different. It's a place to do great work and live and be creative, etc. But it's how we package that up in as the brand, as well as these things which are these people will be making long-term decisions about the future of their companies right now, aren't they? So, Briony, from your perspective, into the Rocketmakers, into cohorts of people, that kind of thing, when you're all physically separated, is that impacting, or are you working around that, or
Yeah, so it's, I think it's a really interesting area. One I've been talking about this morning actually is actually the kind of volume of support that exists. And Steve alluded earlier to people kind of finding the right support for them in terms of what they need, whether that is a physical space or whether it is a particular skill set or a particular discipline that focuses on a certain industry or sector. I think helping people to find that specific support that's going to best fit their values and their needs is the thing that's really helpful. So Rocketmakers built actually when I was over at Engine Shed, but Rocketmakers built the growth map, which attempted to start to kind of map out some of those different services and support functions that exist across the wider region. And I think the more we can do to really equip people with information about all of the different programs, because there's a huge number popping up at the moment. So yeah, starting to get to a point where we can really support people to understand all the options that are on the table is something that would be really valuable. Yeah. From my perspective, I started out in network building, was a large part of my career about 10 years ago. And the value of human interaction, yes, whilst you can be a bit more efficient when you're working from home, and absolutely I echo what Steve's saying in terms of whether offices are really the answer to all ills. I think, there is so much value in those interactions, those informal interactions that you're able to have, all the things that you overhear. Certainly talking to new colleagues who've joined Rocketmakers since lockdown started, one of the things that they're missing is just being able to overhear or to quickly ask somebody a kind of small question of their neighbour, and you don't have that kind of informal constant interaction, which allows you to build that bank of knowledge and that social capital that you need at work in order to build your commitment to and engagement with. Yeah. I think isn't it the biggest indicator of whether or not you leave somewhere is whether you have a best friend at work. I think that's one of the top 3 reasons. So it's going to be very hard to build those kind of relationships.
We are in a lot of the time around those elements of it. And Brian, so have you come up with a solution yet at Bath SETsquared, or working through it?
Yeah, no, I think there's something we sort of started on fairly early because we kind of, I think, saw the way it was going, and I guess having done the survey, that kind of gave us the emphasis on which way to go. So we spend a lot of time looking at our membership programs and kind of redesigning those around virtual delivery. And it's not simply a case of taking what you do now and putting it online. There are whole new methodologies, whole new approaches to work with. I think some of the sort of unintended consequences in this are actually quite interesting things. The fact that when you work on these kind of platforms, you are really compressing the amount of space you've got to work in, both in terms of the physical space you've got, but also in terms of the time that you can concentrate for. Everything is really intense. Everything is really short bursts. It's a little bit more like, I like to say to people, we're all TV producers now. We're not doing this kind of long drawn out, discuss the state of the universe, workshop it to death approach anymore. Workshops are really short and snappy.
Yeah.
So we've looked at rebuilding a lot of that. But I think also one of the things we have done is we've accelerated the development of our iStart facility, which is going to be effectively the next generation of innovation centre. And I think that has the advantage to some extent in terms of timing, that will be a big development that has the ability to be designed around COVID-friendly practices. So not only are we looking at, what do we do in terms of delivery, what do we actually do in terms of physical space where people can meet and develop. I'll put a link on the site for everyone to, if they want to find out a bit more about iStart. Sure. It was a really nice collaboration between all the key players in Bath. So rather than just it being, one or two people, whether it's us or anyone else, sort of doing this, what do we think is the answer? It's that collective approach that I think will get us through this.
Yeah, and that's what we are seeing more and more, aren't we? Actually, we are talking, we are using different tools, but we are definitely talking more.
Oh yeah, and I think one of the great things that's come out of this is that the incubators and accelerators in the region are working much more closely together, and that's a real strength that we have. I mean, we have some absolutely sensational quality people to mentor, to help develop, to consult, to bring in the skill sets that are needed. So we make sure that more of those really great startups don't fall by the wayside for want of decent advice.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Brian. Hey, everyone, I completely forgot to mention, we were quite interested in running a couple of quick fire polls. So if you see the poll function, click on that. The first question is, who are you? It's just interesting to know across this audience of 40 or so people we've got this morning for this first session, whether we are talking to startups, whether they're too busy starting up, whether it's established tech business, support organizations. Thanks everyone. So yeah, people are finding in there, yeah, we've got a mix, but 33% established, 13% startup, support organization, other. And I think that what we do know is how, I suppose, that's the tech ecosystem in action, and actually those startups are one part of it, but actually we all have a role and responsibility, because I guess the established tech company, you need the talent, you need the ideas, you need the collaborations, and maybe that's something we can all think about. There's the tech clusters like Tech Southwest, but as companies, we've all through journeys and we've got knowledge. How you can reach out and connect, is quite a key part of this. Another poll has just popped up. Joe brackets Toby Parkinson's on fire. Next 12 months confidence-ometer. So where the options range from fills me with dread, tough but will survive, limited impact, we expect to grow, busiest time ever. So please take that one as well. And I think again, it's just getting a sense, isn't it, in terms of where we're at and where we're heading, I suppose. With so much uncertainty. I guess sort of drawing this session to a conclusion before we head over to space tech. If you're a startup right now and there was a kind of one fundamental tip, resource, distilling it down into a soundbite, which is always a really hard thing to do. But Steve, what would yours be? There's the one tip for the startups that was part of this group this morning, and for the rest of us to spread the word about. What would it be? Steve, you might be on mute, Steve. Or...
Number
Steve,
one.
There we go.
Don't sit by a busy road and mute yourself all the time.
Yeah, good tip.
I think for a startup particularly, there is so much scope for learning. It's so much stuff you can do at home. So you can go on. There's lots of content out there that you can learn some of the things you need to start with incubators and other people. If you can get that base level of knowledge, you'll know more what you need to know when you go and seek out help. So if you have no base knowledge, when you go and ask for some help, you spend a lot of time getting them to work out what it is you need to do first. If you can go with a base level of knowledge, and it's go on Tech Nation, Digital Business Academy, whatever it might be, you can get yourself a little bit of learning online, and then engage. And I think the second point is start talking to people. The more you talk to people, the more you'll get the questions, which will then start focusing on where you need to go.
Yeah, you used that too. One of those bound to be Briony's or Brian. So it's the advantage of going first, isn't it? But no, good tips there. So Briony, from you.
So my biggest one relates to what I was saying earlier, which would be about building your network and connecting with people in a similar situation to where you are, because I think you can learn so much more. So just in the last week, I've learned about 2 new big grant funding opportunities, which would be relevant to startups. And I think, I wouldn't know about those if I wasn't well networked with other people. So I'd be encouraging startups, whilst yes, you've got to focus on forecast and reforecast and pivot and all those good things at the same time, but actually you're going to be able to see the opportunities much more if you build your network.
Thanks, Briony. And Brian, finally from you.
Yeah, well, going last is always fun. I've got the dead for that one, I'm afraid. But I mean, in essence, assuming you've written your business plan, first of all, I'd sort of spend some time listening to the people whose advice has proven to be good for you in the past. So work your community, work your mentors, make sure you're getting the best advice you possibly can. But also look for alternative income streams. There are lots of ways of getting funded. They're not all by standing up pitching to a bunch of people in a room. So start thinking about things like tendering. I mean, at the moment, the public sector across Europe is putting out huge amounts of work that you can actually tender for. There are some skill sets you need to get in, and some work you need to do to get actually on those tender documents, on those tender opportunities. But they are things that there is advice on. We're going to be putting together a workshop shortly about that anyway, so keep an eye open for that. Think about joining an incubator, because guess what? Businesses and incubators tend to succeed a lot better.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you, everyone. And just reflecting on the final vote in terms of our confidence, it's interesting. It's a real mix. Only 4% fills me with dread. 36% tough but will survive. Is that the same as 36% we expect to grow? 12% limited impact. 12% busiest time ever. So it is a mixed picture, isn't it? Depending on what specialism, what sector, what stage you're at. There are some challenges, and not everyone's going to get through it, but it is a complex picture. So no, thanks everyone. So on behalf of everyone in the guests, so thanks, and the audience, thanks Briony, thanks Steve, thanks Brian. So we're now diving into the far-flung reaches of the galaxy, as it were, into the space tech, and Toby Parkins, Chair of Tech Office, is leading that session. So what, we will leave this one, and we will, and within the sessions function on the left-hand side, you'll be able to go into the space tech one. I will just very quickly mention the space tech, and then we've got a look at the tech ecosystem in terms of 3 different examples of different types of support that's out there with Digital Skills Partnership, Technology for Success, and Digital Northern Devon as an example of a tech cluster and what they're doing on the ground. There is live networking coming up as well for those who can stay around for that. And I will just give a shout out to Tech Southwest Awards, because the entries, we've got lots of entries coming in, but there is still more time over the summer to get those entries in as well. And it's free now. It's free this year. It's a special one-off, which I think is the right thing to do to sort of celebrate and showcase this team actually more than ever. So thanks everyone. Thanks again, wonderful guests for this one. We'll leave this. We'll head on to the next session, and you'll have a whole new lineup of people, wonderful people, chatting about space tech. Okay. Cheers all. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.